or if it was raining. And I can't tell you, that was one of the things that made me the most nervous on this film, because we didn't have any cover sets like most big movies do. We had nothing to go to if it was pouring rain. We'd have to shoot. And we certainly couldn't do that because it wouldn't match. And if it was snowing, it wouldn't match either. And we also didn't have any days to go back. This was it. So when this day was done, it was a huge day because I knew that the rest was interiors and that the movie would somehow cut together as being in the same day. And believe me, that was a huge thing for me at that time. And I celebrated with a fine cigar, and I ended up teaching all the young people on our crew how to smoke cigars, and I'm sure they will sue me when they all get lung cancer in a few years. But what can I tell you? I love this shot with the reflection of Fifth Avenue on the window of the car. It's just great. I didn't have a monitor on this movie. We couldn't afford it, so I was watching from a van with the van door open, driving in front of them, listening on headphones, and Iron, the sound guy, was in the trunk again. But it's a great scene, and it's just very vital. And again, we dialogue it. We end it early. We end it exactly where we want to, but not necessarily where it was scripted to end. This sequence in the limo was the only scene that we reshot in the movie, because we only shot John Rubinstein's shot because the eye line didn't match. Eye line is something that is a big bother, and you have a script supervisor who's supposed to make sure that matches, that people look like they're looking in the right direction. And somehow a script supervisor didn't catch this, and we ended up firing him. Not for this, but for another reason. It's pretty funny to fire someone you're not paying. Not funny, sad. But anyway, so we shot the scene, and the eye line didn't match, and we didn't realize this till a week and a half later because we couldn't really afford dailies. So we were picking up our film every few days when a check would clear and we'd be able to pay for it. And Adam was editing at night because we got a free Avid, but only at night. So it took him a few days to put this together. So a week and a half later, on the last day of shooting, he calls me up and says, "It's not matching. You have to reshoot this." And believe me, that was not the call I wanted to get. But thankfully, John had not gone back to Los Angeles, and we ended up reshooting the scene. I think he's looking at me, I'm reading the lines, and he's pretending to be reacting to actual actors as opposed to his exhausted director with 2 weeks of beard stubble and, much need of rest. But he does a great job. This is another shot that the pan and scan makes me sad because it's quite a beautiful shot, the composition of it, if you could see the rest of the people in the room. But most of the film is fine the way it is not in 185, but this is certainly something you can tell that the limo driver's face is cut off and you can't really see Phil Klein, the FBI guy's face. Basically, this is why widescreen DVDs were invented, but not on this one. What can I tell you? It's interesting that at the end of this scene, when Frank finds out that it's Ruby on the tape, he is supposed to, in the script, scream, a guttural scream, which he does not in the finished film. But it was a very theatrical device, a very emotional thing to see him scream. It's something that I really wanted to do. I thought it would be interesting. We talked a lot about it, and John was willing to try it, even though it was a little odd. So at the end of the scene where he finds out that Ruby is the kidnapper, he did this scream, and it was very effective. It was very loud. It was very soulful, and he did it, and I loved it. We all loved it, and people were crying. It was very interesting. So we ended up cutting it into the movie, and instead of crying, well, we were crying, but we were crying because it was so bad. It wasn't John's acting. It was just awkward. It was fake. It was theatrical. Basically, he should have been crying inside, not outside. But later, when we were editing, during the trippy sequence with the black near-naked gun dealer, when John is sort of on drugs and drunk, we added that scream at one point, just as an idea to show his inner self. And since the lens that we shot that scene on and the lens we were shooting the scene with the gun dealer were the same, the framing was exactly the same, and it almost looks like we meant to do it. This film is basically every frame of film we shot almost ended up in the film. Because we needed to be inventive here. We weren't reshooting anything. So when we wanted to, we, in editing, decided we needed more emotion. We needed to get more inside of John's head. We had to think of other ways to do it. And so we were finding footage that we were suddenly not using and figuring ways to use it again. And that sort of was the way we edited the whole movie. And it was really liberating and interesting in its in the tightness that we had. Basically, the movie needed to be 82 minutes. It is 82 minutes. In order to sell it to HBO, it has to be 82 minutes. And the first cut of the film was like 75 minutes. We really couldn't cut that much out of the film. Had I been able to cut anything out of the film, I would have cut this scene, which is sort of repetitive from the scene in the limo. It almost says the same thing. But I was in no position to cut anything because we had to have the movie be long enough, and there were certain places that I had cut stuff because it was just bad or boring. So this was certainly a case of if the movie was long enough, I would have cut it, but I didn't. And the movie ended up being about 78 minutes, and we have about a 4-minute credit roll at the end, the slowest credit roll known to man. We have a lot of people to thank, but it was a slow credit roll, mostly so that we could get to 82 minutes so that we could sell the movie. Although I do happen to like the way this scene is lit and their performances in it. It's just, for a movie that's pretty darn tight, this is sort of the first moment that is a little slack. But what can I do now? The following scene that we're about to go to is the sequence where John, playing Frank, is begging Angela, the maid, played by the great Novella Nelson, to talk to him. This is obviously the mother of Ruby, who's been living in his house, not knowing why her daughter ran away. And this was one of the best editing experiences I've ever had because we decided to play the whole scene before she talked on her back. And as you watch it, it's very sort of frustrating to the viewer that we don't cut and see her. And the more John begs her to talk, the less we don't show her, and it becomes as frustrating to the viewer as to John. And when we finally do cut to her, she has something to say. And it was interesting because we had tried to cut it normally back and forth, and it was weirdly not working. And we just tried it this way. And since then, I've done this sort of trick, which, is a trick, really, in editing. Most people won't even notice it, but it really is effective. So finally, Novella starts talking, and we ended up doing about 10 takes of this shot, which was, I think, the most we ever did of any single shot in the movie, with a slow dolly in towards her. It's a very important scene, and she wanted to get it absolutely perfect, as did I. And then, we did. And it's a testament to her underplaying and her acting. It's really a difficult role for African American actors to play a maid or a servant. There is a thing about that. I mean, it's the role they're always sort of made to play. But Novella was attracted to it because there is this sort of quiet dignity and rage with her character, and she was great. We were lucky to have her, believe me, on this film. When she walks off at the end of this shot, which is obviously very powerful, you'll see that the two FBI guys in the background behind her over her shoulder laugh. And this is something that I did first time on this movie, and I've done it a few times. I did it in my movie Oxygen with Adrian Brody and Maura Tierney. Whenever I have a scene where a character is supposed to be upset, I love the idea that someone's having a good time right in their presence, completely oblivious. And so that's why they laugh there. He's going through this hell, and these FBI guys, who are obviously off duty or whatever, they're completely oblivious. And it's something that I just came up with on the set, and I really loved, and I've done it a few times since. Now, this flashback is really interesting. Sarah and I decided to do this all in one take. We were going to have this memory come back to him and not do a film trick. So we had John sitting in this chair, and then we had him remembering this dialogue with a younger version of himself and Ruby. and we had the script supervisor reading the lines. And basically, as soon as the camera panned off him to a much younger Ruby, we had a different shirt waiting for him right off of the camera. I mean, the second the camera starts moving to the left, which is basically right now, as soon as John was off camera, we switched shirts so that when we get to Amber, Ruby, and she's talking to him, he's switching shirts, and so that he can come into that shot and be in his own flashback, which I thought was really a kind of a cool and clever idea. It was difficult to do. We had to do it a few times to get the timing right. But in fact, that hand that just came in was not John's hand. It was the assistant director's hand. John was still busy changing his shirt. One of the things that's so great about Amber's performance is her stuff in these scenes when she's playing a much more vulnerable version of Ruby, this innocent girl who has this crush on this older man, and compared to the anger and sort of coldness and fire that she has in current day, this sort of vulnerability and little girl-like quality. I mean, she was only 19 when we made this movie, but she was a very accomplished actor, and these scenes had to work for the whole movie to make any sense, and they were great. They did. And believe me, it has nothing to do with my directing. It is all to do with her acting. She's great. I love jump cutting out of a memory like that. I think it's very effective. This whole area was very specifically scripted. He starts going out, and he's basically, this is the beginning of the third act, he's basically going out on an evening of sort of self-destruction, of debauchery.
Maybe we should go for a walk.
So these flashbacks sort of that Frank has were very specifically scripted. Unlike other places in the movie, these were we would carefully plan them so that we would slowly reveal what really happened between him and Ruby in a way that sort of was also showing him slowly getting drunk,